economy. Joining me right now is Republican Texas Congressman and House Financial Services Committee Chairman Jeb Hensarling. Mr. Chairman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Maria. Thank you.
Can you walk us through the most important parts that you would like to see changed within Dodd-Frank?
Well, I listened to your lead-in, Maria, and I wish I could actually believe it all. The truth is, this is not a major rollback of Dodd-Frank. I wish it was. I think I would view it more as a recalibration. But it is an important piece of legislation that the Senate is taking up. I mean, frankly, we passed a major piece of legislation in the House back in June, and now it is March of the next year, so we've been waiting patiently. So what I think this is mainly is something that will help our community financial institutions, to some extent our regional banks that have a simple banking model. I think also you will see some improvements kind of in the Jobs Act, capital formation for our early growth companies, our startups. But this is not any kind of major rollback of the Dodd-Frank Act, because that would require 60 votes in the Senate. It's hard to get 60 votes in the Senate to agree on a Mother's Day resolution. Yeah. So I don't quite know what's going to come out of the Senate bill, but just the fact that Senator Crapo, my Senate counterpart, has got it this far, it's important. We're losing a community bank or credit union a day in America, and they're not dying of natural causes. They're dying from the sheer weight, volume, cost, and complexity of Dodd-Frank. And at the same time, in America, we have way too many garages that have old cars, and they need new startups. And so we want to expand upon the very successful Jobs Act. So we have a number of those provisions. And again, our House bill is so much more robust. I'm just to see what the Senate can do, and we look forward to negotiating with it.
All right. Thank you for that rundown. I guess people have been waiting to see some of the rollbacks that have taken place in regulations hit financial services. So I think that was really what I was referring to, the fact that it's finally happening or beginning in financial services. What about proprietary trading, the so-called Volcker rule? Is that going to be addressed?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. In the House bill, we actually just repealed the Volcker rule. I mean, it is a solution in search of a problem. And as we know, we've heard from all our regulators, most recently from Chairman Powell of the Federal Reserve, that by and large, this is very, very hard to enforce. I mean, you practically have to have Dr. Phil on your trading desk asking you, well, what were you thinking about when you made that trade? And so I'm afraid that we are seeing high levels of illiquidity, high levels of volatility in our fixed income markets. And a lot of that is due to the Volcker rule that had nothing to do with the financial crisis. It was just more piling on at the last minute. If I remember using the phrase we used in Capitol Hill, this was something that was just airdropped into the conference between the House and Senate, if I remember right. And so it's really hurting. It hurts the economy. It's making capital more expensive, less available. So we're trying to get rid of it. If not, we ought to at least moderate it and give our regulators the ability to tailor this. And kind of have the presumption of innocence as opposed to you're guilty until proven innocent, which is kind of the way the Volcker rule is overseen now.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I keep saying is when you have a rule called proprietary trading or the Volcker rule and you can't even write it, how are you going to enforce it, right? Because you can't, differentiate what's trading for your own account or trading for the customer, so you can't really write it. They're going to enforce it, but I don't want to get caught up in the weeds. You say the institutions that will be impacted are those community financial services companies, those regional banks, capital formation, loosening up of capital. What does that lead to on a practical level? How do consumers get impacted?
Well, I think still, again, although it's modest, it's still important. I think you'll see more startups. I think you'll see a greater level of entrepreneurship. And so I think what the president has done to help bring us the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is important. I mean, we now know that once again, after almost 8 years of 1.6% GDP growth, we're now averaging 3% economic growth. I think, frankly, this economy is quite capable of doing 3.5%, but we're going to have common sense regulation that meets a cost-benefit test. We're going to have a regulatory rollback of what was done in the Obama administration, where 6 of the worst 7 regulatory years took place on his watch, in order to unleash entrepreneurship, have 3.5% GDP growth. That means greater take-home pay, and it means a much more vibrant American dream. People can buy more cars, they can send more kids to college, they can finally pay their medical bill.
Yeah.
That's the difference between 3% GDP growth and 3.5% GDP growth. And I think this bill is important. Again, I wish it was more robust, but I'm going to actually have to see what comes across the Senate floor over my right shoulder.
Well, it's good that you're getting started on this anyway in the Senate. Let me move on, because you just said something really important, and that is this economy is capable of 3.5% growth. People are wondering if that number, or growth in general, that we've started here, this new trajectory that we are on, if that's threatened because of these tariffs. President Trump's plan to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum is increasing NAFTA pressure on Mexico and Canada. Reports say now that the EU is going to retaliate. They're preparing a punitive 25% tariff on iconic brands in retaliation. And the GOP seems to be split on this. Where are you on this issue, sir?
Well, I highly respect what the president has done, again, for our Tax Cut and Jobs Act. I very much respect what he has done on this regulatory rollback, but I'm afraid that he's going to take a number of steps forward and take several steps backwards with what he's doing on trade. I very much disagree. I've encouraged the president to be quite surgical in whatever he does. I know we don't know the final details. I represent a congressional district that's kind of the eastern part of the city of Dallas and a lot of rural East Texas. I've already heard from two major employers in two rural counties. One uses steel to make shelving and sell it to people like Walmart. Another one takes steel and makes small buildings, and they both tell me this is going to hurt our business. It's going to send our prices up. We're going to lose customers. We're going to lose jobs. I mean, I respectfully disagree with our president, who I admire so much of what he's done, but I don't know who's going to win in this trade war. And so I hear, some voices of the administration said, well, this is a very small part of GDP.
Right.
It's basically a rounding error, but it doesn't end that way. Maybe it starts out that way. And again, as you well point out, we're already getting threats from the EU. And so, as I understand it, we have, maybe 115,000 people involved in the production of steel in the U.S.,
right.
But we have millions that take that raw material and fabricate it into something else.
That's
and we
right.
have over 300 million consumers. They're going to be harmed. I really think the president's on the wrong track here. I would urge him to reconsider.
Yeah, this is an issue that we've been talking about, that the jobs impacted are so many more from the companies that are inputting steel and aluminum. I want to get to the election, the primary in Texas in a second, but let me ask you this. What is the other solution? Is there another solution to get the U.S. out of the position of constantly being on the losing end of these trade deals?
Well, I think in respects, that's not the right way to look at it. This isn't the Olympics, and as somebody else pointed out earlier, It's not a zero-sum game. I mean, every time our economy is booming is when we tend to run the greatest trade deficits. I run a trade deficit with my grocer every month. I run a trade deficit with the druggist. But the big question is, what is our GDP growth? Can we afford to buy products overseas? So, listen, the president's a great negotiator.
Yeah.
I hope that I'm wrong and he's right, and that this is going to lead to something good, but his history is my guide. I seriously doubt it. The president says he wants to negotiate bilateral deals. Then fine, let's go negotiate bilateral deals. But right now, these actions are inviting retaliatory actions.
Yes.
And the last time there was a significant trade war, I remember the Smoot-Hawley tariff. We all learned about it in our economic textbooks. It was not a good thing.
Yeah, all right. Well, you're mimicking a lot of the things that we've been saying on this set this morning. Really interesting to get your take on this in terms of what's most important is GDP, not necessarily a trade surplus. Let me move on to Texas, sir. Texans heading to the polls. Your state holding the first primaries of 2018 today. Early voting polls indicate a blue wave could be sweeping over Texas. Is that the way you see it?
No, not in the least. I don't, not only do I not see the blue wave, I don't even see the purple wave. So Republicans today hold all the statewide offices in Texas. We have over 2/3 of the congressional delegation. We hold significant majorities in the House and the Senate. I'm not quite ready to bet my soul or my firstborn, but I would bet a very good sum of money that when the dust settles in November, Texas is still going to be a very, very red state. Democrats are going to have to wake up and work a whole lot harder and be a whole lot less shrill and a whole lot less socialist before they ever take over Texas.
All right, we will leave it there. We'll be watching, sir. Congressman, it's good to see you today. Thanks.
Good to see you.
Jeb